could find a seat and get settled in, we'll try to get started. I thank you. Twice in this past year, the trust we've placed in people that we've known in many cases for our entire lives has been betrayed, and our children have been hurt. We're working with all the different county agencies involved to take a look at school division policies and practices and training, to do everything that we can to ensure this does not happen again. We'd like to ask that we welcome any suggestions, recommendations that folks have. There are sign-up sheets as you leave the auditorium. Any individuals, either community individuals or staff members who would like to serve on a committee to help us in this review and help us take a look at what we're doing to improve. We welcome that input, and again, if you would be interested in serving on one of those committees, there are sign-up sheets. I believe those are at either side of the auditorium. Is that correct? So either side, those sign-up sheets are there, and we hope that folks will work with us, and again, that's for staff and community members as well. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you Sheriff Chuck Wilkins.
I appreciate everybody being here. I'm sorry we have to be here for this reason. I would like to see us gather like this once a year at least to compare notes. We all have to have in-services and things like that, and I think now that we've got a decent place to do it, it would be a good thing that we could do, maybe just before school starts or whatever. Statistically, taught DARE for 18 years, and I always taught about be afraid of strangers, don't talk to strangers, and all that good stuff. Statistically, more than 4 out of 5 child sexual abuse cases are by a person they know, by a person related or has pretty steady contact. They're not strangers. So we need to kind of swing our teachings around a little bit. We need to open our minds. We got a lot of people right now that are upset because we got to tighten up our act all the way around. Sorry it has to happen, but any of us, it's kind of like the thing about checking details. If you don't have anything to hide, you shouldn't be worried about scrutiny. We need to open up and make sure that we don't have these windows of opportunity, even for a false allegation. So they pop up, and if we take every precaution that we can, it's going to make things a lot easier for all of us. They're installing cameras now in some of the transport vehicles, or most of the transport vehicles. We've had cameras in our vehicles for 4 years now, and they have one lens that points out to the cars in front of us and one that points in the car to us. And they record what's going on, because people will fight back dirty, and they'll say, the officer said this or the officer did that, and we're covered when that camera is on. When they first did it, everybody said, you're just looking for a way to catch me. But time and time again, it's proved it's saved our butt on a false allegation. Time and time again. So look at it. Don't fear it. Look at it as your backup. A couple people I want to introduce today, and then I'm going to hand this off. We've got a new school resource officer that will start Monday. He's got 3.5 years of experience. I was lucky enough to get him. He hired him out of Middlesex County. He's got just under 10 years of experience. He will be here on a daily basis from now to the end of school. He was good enough to step forward. I got nobody jumping up and down saying, pick me on this. So I'm very appreciative of him stepping forward. I think he's going to fit in real quick. because he's not bashful whatsoever. Austin, would you stand up? This is Austin Moon. And he's going to be a common sight even after this school year, because he also brings with him 2 canines, one being a drug dog, and he's a passive drug dog, which means he doesn't scratch when he finds things, so he's okay around people. And he's also has a bomb dog, which also helps us locate weapons and ammunition and that type of thing. So we're going to see him in and out of this school on a regular basis. We've been so fortunate. When I talk with other sheriffs and things, there's a tension in between school and the police. We've been so fortunate. We've always had an open door policy, always. And the administration will tell me, I don't want to know when you're coming. And that is a good feeling. Believe me, it's not statewide. So, again, if we got nothing to hide, scrutiny shouldn't bother any of us. We just need to be more self-conscious, more aware of this, and close these windows of opportunity. I did have a gentleman come forward. I was very, very relieved, and everybody else in the department should be also, because I'm not picking on them. Alan Garland, stand up, please. Alan's going to be our new school resource officer. He goes to training in June, and he will be permanently assigned here. Alan's got a little over a year with us. He's on the road. He'll have close to 2 years when the school year starts. But he's got most everybody here knows him. He's worked in the school system. He knows the building. So I think it's going to be a real good match, and looking forward, not dreading the next school year. Looking forward to summer, believe me. We all need a break. But I want to thank everybody. My guys are here in force. This is our training also. I'm sorry we have to be here on these circumstances, but I'd like to see this happen more often. You know, we got to train. We need to train together. There's a lot of opportunities, drugs and all kinds of stuff that we could all work on together. One thing I do want to stress before I give it over: if you have a doubt, we all don't want to point fingers, and we're all kicking ourselves in the butt. We should have seen it. We should have seen it. We should have seen it on all of these incidences. I've had a lot of soul searching, and I think we've done all I personally felt like I've done all we could. Spot checks and good training and people who were trusted. But hindsight's 20/20. There were things that were jumping out in my mind that should have said, hey, maybe we need to look at this different, or maybe we need to change this policy or something. All of us are coming up with these things now. Let's bring them forward when we work on it and make it a prevention type thing. Do it discreetly. Come to the sheriff's office, go to the Department of Social Services, go to the school administration. At least we can open this up and try to do a preventative thing instead of a reactionary thing. Nobody's looking for these incidences, and we all need to work on this thing together. We're all victims of this. So I'd like to introduce one of the people that works with us very closely on a daily basis. She's actually the chief law enforcement officer in the county. She's above me. Ms. Jane Wrightson is a Commonwealth attorney, and she has just a few words for you.
Thank you, Chucky. And thank all of you for being here. I know in reality most of you have to be here, but that doesn't mean that everybody doesn't appreciate you being here and appreciate the administration and Sharon Fisher and the Department of Social Services for putting this on. I think all of us are just horrified by what's happened with both of the situations that have led to criminal charges against teachers in the school system. It's a terrible thing for everybody, for the children involved, for all of you who are staff members here and who've had to go through this. I know that it's been a terribly stressful thing for all of you, and as for everybody. We're all part of this community. I went to school here. My son just graduated from this high school. We're all part of the community, and we love these children. And the last thing that any of us wants is for something terrible to happen to them, or for anything, for them to be in any. This is the last place that they should be in danger. This is where they should be safe, and all of us just want to prevent this from happening. And of course, by the time it gets to me, my job is to try to see that something resembling justice is done. Although it's a little difficult to know what would really what would really be the fair thing in these cases. And I don't mean for the defendant. I mean, how you can't make up to these children for what's happened, or to their families. But that being said, I just really appreciate all of you being here. I want to reiterate what Sheriff Wilkins said. Be aware. None of us want to live in a daily situation where we're paranoid, or where we're watching other people. No one's suggesting that. We just can't live like that. We're not the kind of people who can live that way. But you have to be alert. You have to be trained, and just to keep an eye on what's going on around you. And if you have any concerns, come to the Sheriff's Department, to Social Services, to the school administration, to whomever you feel comfortable with. And let's just do everything we can to make sure our children are safe, and that the school operates the way it should. And thank you all so much for being here. I think just a couple of words from, I'm sorry, Chuck Walsh, who's also Department of Social Services. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chuck Walsh. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Services Board, and it's a bittersweet for us, the Community Services Board, to be here today. We're going to put on the training. Rachel Tiggle, one of my staff, is going to be doing that in a few minutes. But it's bittersweet because what happened in Northumberland County impacts the heart and soul of all of us, particularly all of the staff at the Community Services Board. We serve 10 counties in the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula, and we've been doing that officially since 1974, but actually since 1970, a small group of people convened to start the Community Services Board. So anytime anything like this happens in our communities, we're certainly impacted by it. We're passionate about the things that we do as a Community Services Board, and one of those things is educating our community about issues such as this, and also trying to come up with everything that we can do to prevent this from occurring again. The sadness that we feel with what's going on in Northumberland County cuts deep to our, as I said, to our heart and soul. But the healing that you're going to be going through, and we're going to through, started as soon as your administrators, as soon as the Sheriff's Department, as soon as you folks started to come together and figure out, plan what to do from this point forward. Hopefully we're part of that today. We're glad to be collaborating here, and we're available also after the presentation today, answering any questions. If you have any other issues, please don't hesitate to seek out one of my staff. We're certainly available to everyone. Thank you. And I think I'm supposed to introduce Sharon Fisher, the Director of Northumberland Department of Social Services.
Morning. We're very excited about this collaborative effort today, where all of our agencies are coming together and members of our community. This is an effort to provide information to everyone on how we can all go about protecting the children in our community. The protection of children in our community is everyone's job. So we're all here together as a joint effort. We're very appreciative of the presence and support of all of the heads of the agencies that are participating in this effort. And let me just mention two other people who are key participants. Jackie Clayton, who is the social work supervisor at the Department of Social Services. She's been very involved in helping to put all of this together. And then, as Chuck just mentioned, Rachel Teagle, who is the director of the Division of Youth and Family Services at the Community Services Board, and she will be providing the training. Jackie will also be following up afterwards with information on the reporting of child abuse. So the purpose today is to provide training for all of the folks who are present here today on the protection of children in our community. We all need to know the signs and symptoms of child abuse if it's occurring, and know what to do if we suspect that it's happening. That will be the focus today. In addition to the training, you may be aware April is coming soon, and April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. The theme this year is Every Child Counts. Know them, nurture them, protect them. The protection of children is everyone's job. We have a number of activities and public information efforts planned, and some of these are getting started now in preparation. Following the training today, there are a number of booths that are set up in the back of the auditorium with information on child abuse prevention and child safety. Also today, in preparation for Child Abuse Prevention Month, there'll be an opportunity for any of you who would like to purchase and pre-order T-shirts from the Northumberland girls soccer team with the theme that every child counts, know them, nurture them, protect them. And everyone will be encouraged to wear the T-shirts during the month of April, and especially to wear them to the girls' soccer game on April the 18th, at which time the girls will be dedicating the game to child abuse prevention. I think it's very special to have this kind of contribution directly from our young people. In addition, as a show of support for child abuse prevention, the group Bikers Against Child Abuse will be attending that game. This is a very interesting, select group of motorcycle enthusiasts who have taken on this cause and get involved where they can in supporting the effort. They will be attending the soccer game with their bikes, which will be a special attraction and show of support for this effort. In April, there will also be a pinwheel garden at the Northumberland Schools sign at Route 360 and Academic Lane, as well as a garden at the YMCA, at Social Services, and at the courthouse in Heathsville. The pinwheels are a symbol of the prevention of child abuse. The message that they are to convey is, shining in the sun, the pinwheel is reflective of the bright future all children deserve. Today's training is part of our overall effort to help the public understand the whole issue, specifically of child sexual abuse. How do you recognize the symptoms and circumstances? What is the effect of sexual abuse on the child? What is your responsibility as a mandated reporter or member of the community to report it and to help prevent it? The Community Services Board has been working with us on the training of foster parents to work with children who have particularly significant difficulties as a result of child abuse or neglect. So we're very fortunate to have with us today Rachel as our trainer, and she's one of the key people who has been working with us on this project. And Jackie Clayton from our office will be introducing her. Today is a day of training. There'll be an opportunity for questions at the end of the training. The questions need to be related to the training. Today is for the purpose of helping everyone understand about the general issue of child sexual abuse and what they can do to prevent it. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Jackie Clayton from the Department of Social Services to introduce our speaker.
Good morning. We brought kudos for the teachers, so I hope everybody got their kudos, because we do think you're doing a great job, and hopefully our training will help you. I have the honor of introducing Rachel Teagle. Many of you may know her because she was a school-based counselor through the CSB. Rachel attended the University of Virginia, where she earned her bachelor's degree in psychology in 1991. She earned her master's degree in community counseling from the College of William and Mary in 2006. She became a licensed professional counselor in 2008. Rachel's early experience included providing mental health services in an outpatient setting as part of a therapeutic foster home program and as a case manager emergency service counselor. More recently, she has worked as an intensive in-home therapist, intensive outpatient therapist, the school-based counselor, and she was the intensive outpatient coordinator for the CSB. She's currently the Director of Youth and Family Services, a division of the Community Services Board. Rachel has completed specialized training in clinical supervision and parenting out-of-control adolescents. She's learned invaluable skills related to reactive attachment issues through repeated collaborations with the Mary D. Ainsworth Attachment Clinic. She represents the CSB on the Virginia Community Services Board Child Council and the Quality Improvement Work Group for Intensive Services. She also continues to carry a small intensive outpatient caseload. So if you would help me welcome Ms. Teagle, we'll go ahead and start the training.
I just told Jackie, no, I'm on. I hope so. Everybody can hear me okay? Not too much? I had a whole list of things that I was going to do first that I now get to cross off because they've been done so well already. I wanted to commend everybody for being here. You've heard that better than I could have said it. I'm standing under a sign that might as well say the human misery business. Probably what it feels like coming in today. I can't imagine much that would be less appealing than talking about something we don't even like to think about. The fact that you're here is such a testament to your community. We may have dueling mics. If I do a good job, and I share information that's valuable and helpful to you, then you may see something early enough to be taken action and prevent the misery. If we miss it, and unfortunately we miss it all the time, it's the nature of the beast, then maybe when you do see it, when they trust you enough to say, hey, this has happened to me, you'll be better prepared to respond. And that will decrease the misery for someone else. So it's good that you're here. I have a whole list of things to cover. Before I start, I want to do a disclaimer. You are not, unfortunately, getting a professional public speaker today. I will do my very best. I expect to start out rocky and smooth out for you, so be patient, keep your expectations low. I can only pleasantly surprise. And once I get comfortable, I will probably start pacing and walking, so just try to keep up. We're going to start with the scope of the problem. If you can throw up the first slide. We would like to think it's very rare, but we know that it isn't. 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 5 boys will experience childhood sexual abuse before the age of 18. The National Resource Council estimates that between 20 and 62% of the U.S. population has been sexually abused. Now, if you're looking at this like I am, 20 to 62% is a huge gap. We'll get back to the reason for that in just a minute. Either way, it's a huge number of people. 90% of child victims know their offender. Most of the time, it is not the picture of a stranger in a trench coat in an alley. It's somebody that they know. It's somebody that they trust. This is kind of the face of the problem. If we can throw up the next one. This gets to the reason for that 20 to 62% gap. Sexual abuse is believed to be significantly underreported due to shame, fear, repressed memory of abuse, all kinds of reasons. Now, the shame and the fear, we understand. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. Memory of the abuse. Maybe the child was too young and they don't have a real conscious memory of it. Doesn't mean it didn't impact them, but they may not be able to recall it. Maybe they don't want to think about it. They push it out of their minds. The next one up here, refusal to participate in services, also includes refusal to participate in surveys. We gather these numbers by getting with folks like law enforcement and CPS who have actual solid numbers and reports, and then we add on self-report survey kind of stuff. If we had lots of time, we could have done a little exercise today where we started out with me walking down the aisles handing out a form and saying, okay, this is a little survey on your sex life. Compare with a friend if you want, write down the answers, we'll collect them, and we'll talk about it. Some of us may be very comfortable with that, but I would suspect many of us would be like, no thank you, not going to do it. The same goes for these surveys. It's why we have a range of 20 to 62%. Who wants to report this? Who wants to answer a question and check a box? The final one up there is really interesting, and it may be something we don't always think about. Many people will not define what happened to them as abuse. Well, yeah, Grandpa's hand would slip, but he was old and he didn't mean to. All the time he didn't mean to, but it was an accident. Or, yeah, Dad kissed me on the mouth, but he was really drunk and he thought I was Mom. It didn't hurt me, and you know, maybe it was my fault, so it probably really wasn't abuse. All of these things go into the thinking, and so the individual who has that kind of experience may say, I really wasn't abused. It didn't happen to me. So we know that the numbers we have look high, are probably low, and aren't exactly hard-firm numbers. The next slide. Abuse typically occurs within a long-term, ongoing relationship between the offender and the victim. It escalates over time, and it lasts an average of 4 years. For every person we count, we're not talking usually about one instance of abuse. We're talking about maybe several years of abuse. It further clarifies what these numbers look like. The law enforcement and judicial folks here could probably speak to the next one better than I can. This is another, they're numbers for the purpose of painting the picture. Clearly, they aren't exactly counted. What we estimate is that 1 in 10 of offenders actually get caught. 9 are out there under the radar. Of the ones who are caught, only 1 in 10 of those will actually make it all the way to trial. There are all kinds of reasons they don't get all the way to trial. There's no physical evidence, the story's shaky, we suspect, but we really don't know. We basically can't prove it enough to outweigh all the things that go along with taking a victim to court. So only 1 in 10 will make it to trial. Of the ones who make it to trial, only about 1 in 10 will get convicted. We lose a lot of them at every step along the way. Convicted sex offenders, the ones who were caught, they were tried, they were convicted. When you interview them, report, on average, 100 victims or more over the course of a lifetime. There's really nothing else to say about that. It's huge. And we don't know about it. We don't know about it because it's secret by nature, and it's very hard to prove. But we're working on it. All of you here are working on it. So that's kind of the scope of what we're looking at. The next slide starts with effects seen in childhood. I would love to be able to hand you a list and say, if you see A, B, and C, you know without a doubt this is what we're doing. And it doesn't exist. The effects for children can be behavioral, they can be physical, they can be cognitive in their thinking or emotional problems, and they exist on a wide continuum. The intensity of a child's response to this experience will vary. The good news is that a small portion of children who experience this won't have long-term effects, thank God. There's something about their environment, their situation, their personal characteristics. We'll talk a little bit about those later. We call them protective factors that help them be particularly resilient. Most people do experience some sort of outcome. The intensity of that is determined by all those things. How did people respond to me when they knew? How long was the abuse? What was the abuse? How old was I? How did I think about it? All of those things go into that. So we'll have the whole continuum. What I've pulled together are a few slides. The next one starts with effects that you're going to see in preschoolers. There are two columns. The one on the left is a list of the most common effects that you're going to see. The column on the right are other very common. That list is not all inclusive, although there are tons of them up here. These are the most common and then other common effects for kids this age. So on the most common side, we have the things that kind of make sense to us. Sexualized behaviors. That can be they act seductive, which looks pretty noticeable when you're talking about a preschooler. They should know how to do that, so it's something that's also a red flag for later. Excessive masturbation, sexual language, showing their privates. Now, we'll come back to what's normal and not normal because preschoolers do that too, just because. But sometimes in combination, we have a pattern that is really serious. Here, these things show up frequently in children who've been sexually abused. Anxiety, nightmares. On the common side, difficulty separating, hyperactivity, depression, guilt, tantrums, a whole range of behavior problems for these kids. Encopresis and enuresis. Most of you guys, these are kind of the psychobabble terms for they wet their pants and they mess themselves. Sleep disturbance, they can't sleep at all, they want to sleep all the time, headaches, all those things. When you flip up to school-age children, it shifts a little bit. School-age children, on the most common side, tend to regress. They start acting less mature than they should for their age. You see a lot more hyperactivity, a lot more nightmares, a lot more fears, aggression toward other kids, even adults, and learning difficulties, all very common. Now notice that the most common effects in a school-age child are not sexual. So when you see these things, you're not necessarily going to go to sexual abuse, okay? On the other side, still common, not the most common, but still common, these kids withdraw. They do demonstrate sexualized behavior, not really appropriate for the age. They get depressed. They get delinquent. They misbehave. They're stealing. Stealing gets real common. You may start seeing suicidal thoughts in these kids. Their grades drop. They can't concentrate. They have sleep problems and eating problems. Again, could be a sign of sexual abuse, could be a host of other things. So as we go through this and we're looking at signs, symptoms, red flags, remember to think in terms of patterns, combinations of these things. For adolescents, pretty similar to school-age children. Their most common are being withdrawn. Self-injury becomes much more frequent at this age as a response. Delinquency, depression, suicidal ideations, these kids will start running away and they start spiking in substance abuse. And then all of those other things that seem to kind of go for school age and adolescence. And some of them are still for the preschoolers: nightmares, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, poor peer relationships. All of these things come in. When you think back to what we just covered on the scope of people affected and you look at the wide range of problems it can create, it really can feel overwhelming. It's a lot of stuff. So we could tell ourselves, hey, great, but at least it's over after childhood, because when you get to be an adult, you got skills. You've got better intellectual capability. It's stopped. You can protect yourself. We can move on. The effects continue into adulthood if the child doesn't have the right protective factors in place. If there's no intervention, it can continue into adulthood. If anybody has a handout and the slide that comes up next does not look like that, you got one of my rough draft handouts. Goes back to the I'm not a professional public speaker thing. Some of them left off the words Healthy Families Virginia. So this is what it should say, because the Adverse Childhood Experiences study did not specifically address the relationship between unemployment and child abuse. These are two different things. The Adverse Childhood Experience study was done by the Centers for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente, and it looked at the impact of adverse or negative experiences in childhood on your health, your physical, medical health as an adult. Healthy Families Virginia did an executive summary report in support of their program, and they're talking about early intervention for really stressed families that will prevent abuse and improve overall functioning. And one of the things they looked at was that when unemployment rises, so does child abuse. Well, it makes sense. Families are already stressed. If you have limited coping strategies available to you, and all of a sudden everybody's unemployed and you can't pay the bills and you're freaking out, you get a little short-tempered. You do things you wouldn't otherwise do. Not an excuse, but an explanation of the correlation. Both of these speak to the impact of what all this abuse does: general abuse, meaning any form, and sexual abuse. So let's look at the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experience. These are the 8, and I'm going to fall right off the stage these are the 8 experiences that they looked at. Child abuse, all forms. Child neglect, parental mental illness of one or both parents, parental substance abuse of one or both parents, parental alcoholism, could be different than substance abuse, and then loss of a parent or parents through abandonment, death, or divorce. These things are not uncommon, particularly if we look at divorce. I mean, that happens all the time. What they found was that the presence of one or more of these events significantly impacted not only your medical health, your lifespan, and general functioning. So one or more, and you get sicker and you die younger. Early intervention can help. And remember, we go back to that great silver lining that some people are strong and resilient, and they're not going to have any impact. But one or more of these, and you can get sicker, and the mortality rate goes up. What it does is we see increased rates of heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, all of those things in people who've experienced these. If you have 4 or more, you are 4 to 12 times more likely, depending if you have 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, to demonstrate alcoholism, drug abuse, depression, and attempted suicide as an adult. So the impact of what happened when you were little can carry on and affect life long term. If there's no intervention, there is also a higher likelihood, not a certainty, but a higher likelihood that you may repeat the abuse, if abuse was what happened to you when you were an adult. So the general effects seen in adulthood of sexual abuse, the specific effects of sexual abuse, because this is adverse experience in general. But we're here to talk about the sexual abuse. So the next one talks about that. People who've experienced childhood sexual abuse, when they then become adults, experience increased rates of depression. Can be everything from I feel guilty, I don't like myself much, to being overtly suicidal. Anxiety that can show up as physical problems, migraines, panic attacks, general worry. Interpersonal problems. Well, again, in the no-brainer column. I'm a child and my trust is violated. Somebody who's supposed to love and protect me hurts me. And they probably told me at the time, this will feel good and it's good for you, but it's really good for me because I want to do it and you don't matter. It's a confusing message. I don't trust people. So I'm going to have problems making friends. I'm going to be socially isolated maybe. Or I may make friends indiscriminately. Since everybody's equally good or bad, I'll make friends with everybody, whether they treat me well or not. I am an increased rate for sexual victimization again. If I've been victimized as a child, the chance that I will choose a partner or partners who will hurt me goes up. I'm going to have trouble parenting. I can't access all my good skills. I can't put my whole self into my parenting. So there's trouble there too. Another one is post-traumatic stress disorder and all of the things that come with that. The nightmares, the panic, intrusive thoughts, going back to that time in my head. So the next one, sexual adjustment problems. Yeah, I learned sex when I was 4. And it wasn't good, healthy sex. I don't even know what good, healthy sex is. The rates for me, as a person who may have experienced child sexual abuse, of promiscuity, prostitution even, total dissatisfaction with relationships, with sexual relationships, I may be phobic. It makes it hard to have a good marriage. It makes it hard to be a good partner to somebody. And it makes life very lonely. Other general symptomatic behaviors, eating disorders, substance abuse, self-mutilation. One thing I didn't put on here, it's a longer issue, we train at another time. Something that falls into this is repetition compulsion. And there is some understanding that people who have experienced a trauma, sexual abuse is one of them, but it could be other things, will sometimes, without thinking about it, without planning to, put themselves in situations to try and do it again and make it come out right. And it's why you may see someone who has been abused as a child, a young girl, sexually abused, gets to be a teenager, young adult, and she keeps picking men who are doing the same thing to her. And the belief is that at some level, it's like, I can get control over this. I can pick this guy, but this time, I'm going to win. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to get away. I'm going to protect myself. I can make it work. Only it typically doesn't. It's one of those things that falls under these symptomatic behaviors. Another is increased risk-taking. If I don't really care about myself, if I believe the world is a dangerous place anyway, I may put myself in situations that other people wouldn't, where I am at risk, where I'm in danger. So we're all caring people. You wouldn't be in the lines of work you're in if you weren't. And we care about the emotional and psychological impact of this. But let's say we didn't for a minute. Let's say, you know what? Yeah, awful for them. Doesn't impact me. I don't have this experience. It's just not really my problem. There are direct costs and indirect costs that go along with this, and it hits us in our pocketbooks. We've got serious financial challenges right now all over the country, and the costs associated with this problem are astronomical. direct cost here, I'm referring to things specifically and directly related to the incident of abuse. It's the health care for the victim. She goes to the doctor, she gets examined, she may need treatment for an STD, she may need treatment for lacerations, all kinds of things. Law enforcement's got to investigate. Social services has to send somebody out. If we get lucky and we catch them, then we got to prosecute. We get through the judicial system, all of this costing big money. If we convict them and we can put them away, or her away, I talk about him, but offenders can be women. We put them away, then we got to house them. We got to give them treatment. And then when they get out, we got to watch them. So we've got this whole colossal bill, cha-ching, 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 every time. Mental health services, we hope, are going along with this, both for the child, for the family, and for the perpetrator. We want to have a chance at this not happening again. Cha-ching. The indirect costs are the things that flow from abuse. Adult criminal activity related to abuse. Pornography trade, and the investigating time it takes for that. Substance use. Theft. Theft to get money for the pornography or the drugs. All of that stuff increases with this. Mental illness rates go up for victims and families. Domestic violence for these folks is higher. Just the loss of productivity. You know, I understand that people have been told you will be here this morning. I imagine there would be other productive things you'd probably like to be doing, that we wouldn't have to be having this conversation. Whoops, sorry. I'm not at work. These folks aren't at work. Most of us are getting paid, right? So there's a cost just for this 3 hours. But beyond that, the productivity for the child, then adult, who survived all this, the family members, they take time off work to go to court. They take time off work because she can't leave the house. She's afraid to go to school. They lose jobs because I got to be home too much of the time. The adult survivor can't concentrate. They got robbed during their childhood of the time to be in extracurriculars and enjoy it, the time to focus on their studies, the time to be as productive as they would like. So when they might have been a brain surgeon, they couldn't concentrate that much. And they're working at a job which, probably great job, hopefully great job, not what it could have been. So, show me the money. Here it is. Now, this was 2001, and I apologize for not having 2012 statistics. I couldn't find them in the time range I had to prepare. But this will give you a picture, $24 billion a year, billion with a B, in direct costs, and $69 billion a year in indirect costs. I would expect that since child abuse numbers have gone up since that time, and our dollar being what it is, that it's higher now. So what is child abuse? Now we know how awful the whole big problem is. What is actually child abuse? Section 63.2-100 of the Code of Virginia. This is what I retrieved from social service resources. A parent or caretaker of a child under 18 years of age commits or allows to be committed any illegal sexual act upon a child. It includes incest, rape, indecent exposure, prostitution, or they allow the child to be used in any sexually explicit visual material. I'm throwing up a second definition on the next slide that came from the American Medical Association. And I like these two together because social services, the Code of Virginia, has to be a legal definition. American Medical Association has taken a more clinical developmental perspective. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. American Medical Association says it is the engagement of a child in sexual activities for which the child is developmentally unprepared and cannot give informed consent. And that piece is hugely important. Child abuse is characterized by deception, force, and coercion. For which they are developmentally unprepared and cannot give informed consent. We look at a 5-year-old, and of course they can't give informed consent. Of course they don't know what they're doing. None of us agonize over it. We know that to be true. We look at the 14-year-old, and people start to have doubts. The 14-year-old, I will put out there, is no more developmentally prepared, no more able to give informed consent to a 58-year-old man or woman than the 5-year-old child is. They can't hang with an adult. They may think they're hanging with them. They may think they're choosing. They may think they're in love. They cannot give informed consent. They're not prepared. We'll talk about how it happens that somebody would prepare someone to do that. I went to a great training put on by the Child Advocacy Center in Roanoke, and we studied one afternoon how to interrogate a suspected offender. I will never have to interrogate an offender, thank God. But the officers showed us what goes into it and what you see. And they had an example about this informed consent with an older child around that topic. So they showed us case studies and snippets, and at one point they had an offender, a video of the offender, who had confessed, and he said, I resisted as long as I could. You got to know, she was always dressing up for me. She always wanted to be with me. She'd ask me if I thought she was pretty. And then she wanted to touch me, and I did not want to do it. But then that one night, I was drunk, and it just happened. And she really should not have come on to me that way. Now, if you're like me, your mind's going to teenage girl. This girl was 6. It really doesn't make a difference to the offender. Some will have a preference, and we'll talk about that too, but they will build the belief around what they want to believe. We have to recognize that children of any age are limited. They are not adults, and that they need to be protected, even from what they may think they want to do. So this is the part people probably really, truly care about. What are the red flags? Child sexual abuse depends on secrecy. It is very hard to spot and even harder to prove. I don't know if that's the good news or the bad news. When you have experienced it in your community the way you have, and when everybody's hurting, for me to say, there was probably very little you could see. Child abuse happens in the dark. It's intentionally kept secret. Might be in some cases a relief. At the same time, it means, oh good gosh, it means we can't see it. So it's a plus and a minus. There may be very little or no physical evidence. We can't have that be our benchmark for is it a real abuse. We're going to be looking, when we talk about this stuff, for patterns, for collections of things. So physical signs. From a prosecution standpoint, if you have a case that there was no physical evidence and you have a case that there was physical evidence is better. We don't want the child to have obvious physical injury from a human standpoint, but if you're going to have to prosecute, it helps. Physical signs can be obvious physical injuries. They're bruised, they're bleeding, they have pain, they have itching. They're going to explain these things to you in a lot of instances as something else. They're ashamed. They don't want to tell you this. There are all kinds of reasons they're keeping it secret. But it's one of the possible signs. Presence of a sexually transmitted disease, particularly in a small child, a teenager who may be sexually active already. It might not mean so much, but if the child is 5, pretty sure it means something. Pregnancy could mean nothing, at least related to abuse, could mean something. Torn, stained, or missing underclothes. When you look at these interrogations of perpetrators and you talk to and you see the interviews with the families, well, she came home and she'd been with him for the weekend and her underwear was torn, but she said she fell off of her bike. I rode a bike as a kid. I don't think I ever tore my panties falling off a bike. The excuse that you get, the explanation that you get, may be technically possible, but you will probably have a feeling that it's highly unlikely, something doesn't ring true. Lost underclothes is a big thing, because if something is torn or stained, you can't send it home to mom, and it disappears. So that's another big sign. Behavioral signs. We could go back, we're not going to go back, to one of those slides that had all the effects, all those effects that you would see, all the behaviors, the sexualized behavior, the depression, the aggression, the trouble with attention, the eating and sleeping problems, all of those things. Those are all possible signs. Some others, increased shyness. Little Johnny used to be really outgoing, and all of a sudden he won't talk to anybody, and he stands like this. It's a change for him. Unexplained gifts or money. We'll go into, in a few slides, the process that an offender uses to entice, seduce, coerce, persuade a child to allow more contact. One way is to give them presents. I love you so much. You're so important to me. Wouldn't you love a new video game? And often that starts well before the abuse. Child gets withdrawn or secretive. Child exhibits extreme anxiety or fear of a specific person or of a gender. My son used to love to go to Grandpa's house, used to love to go to baseball practice. All of a sudden, they're kicking and screaming, they don't want to go. Or they see a man in the grocery store and they climb out of the basket. They just can't handle it. It's a dramatic change in behavior, and it doesn't seem tied to anything. It's a red flag. Now, the next slide says adult-related red flags. I don't mean related to the child who is now grown up, who survived the abuse and is now grown up. I'm talking about the possible offender. And the first one here is a tough one. The adult who takes an unusual interest, goes beyond their normal role, or is just too nice. We're teachers and police officers and social workers. We want people to take a positive interest in children. We take a positive interest in children. I need to put therapist on that list too. We take a positive interest in children. And we don't want you to start looking at everybody who's nice to a child and say, oh gosh, could be one of them. What we're talking about here is the person who takes an interest that doesn't make sense given their role. If the elementary school teacher says, little Johnny's having trouble with adding, little Johnny, I want you to come in at lunchtime and we're going to do our adding today. And it happens in the classroom and the door is open and people can come and go. That's great. If the teacher says, little Johnny, you're having trouble with math, let's go do it outside. I'll do your math with you out behind the school. That's not really necessary. May not be anything at all. If we're talking about an older kid and they're saying, hey, little Johnny, I got basketball practice right after school. Tell you what, meet me here about 5:30. We'll go to my house and study. Well, that doesn't even make sense anymore, right? The adult who treats the child as a friend, not as a child, it's a red flag. May not be anything, may be a red flag. The person who seems to find all kinds of reasons to be alone with them. Reasons that don't necessarily make sense. Oh, no, I'm fine. Tell you what, Mom, we're going to stay after baseball practice for a little while. I'll bring them home. I got a few things to do first, so it'll probably be a couple hours. Doesn't make sense. Adult who is too secretive or too friendly with the parent. The person who befriends mom. Mom's going through a divorce. She's home. She's alone. She needs help. I'll come by. I'll cut the grass. I'll come by. I'll hang out. I'll take the kids. We'll go to the mall for the day. No, you stay home. Don't worry about it. I got it. You need a break. It's another way to gain access. An adult who has their own history of extreme substance abuse, marital problems, or sexual abuse. Big, huge disclaimer here. Just because you've been divorced doesn't mean you're a suspected offender. If you've had a drink, it doesn't mean you're going to hurt a child. I am not in any way saying that these things are causal. The presence of multiple things in these categories increases general risk. People who offend also tend to have some of these issues. But please do not hear that I want you to be worried about every person you know who's had a marital problem, who's had a drinking problem, even if you know someone who has been sexually abused. The fact that one has been abused does not mean you will abuse. Okay? Simply factors that put you in a slightly higher risk. So what do? We've got this whole range of things that we can now worry about. How do we respond to this? I go with trust and verify. We want our teachers, coaches, pastors, social workers, police officers, and therapists to be positive role models and to take an interest, and most people will not hurt a child. But if something feels off to you, trust your gut. Put some protective limits in place. This isn't therapy, so I can do personal disclosure, I guess. My daughter went to a church-run daycare, after-school care. She came home one day and she says, Mom, I had so much fun. We played the tickle game. Now, my therapist ears are going, what? And my mother ears are freaking out. Thank gosh, I held myself together. The tickle game, yeah. Tell me about the tickle game. Sounds like fun. Oh, yeah. You know the guy who volunteers there? He thought up the game. And we play tag, and if you get caught, you get tickled. So now, how old is the guy who volunteers? Oh, he's 14. Okay. Have you ever been it? Oh, no, he's the only one who's it. So I have this picture of a 14-year-old boy chasing my daughter around a playground, tickling her, and it is really freaking me out. She was completely comfortable. She wasn't reporting it was anything hurtful or scary to her. It was at the preschool. People were around. But I was not comfortable with it. So I went to the preschool director. I said, hey, I'm a therapist. You know, we can get kind of weird. I don't want her playing the tickle game anymore. A little uneasy with it. Don't really like it. I'm teaching her boundaries. I don't want her to let people touch her, you know. No more tickle game. Now, her response was absolutely not a problem. Don't have an issue with it. I understand completely. Thank you for sharing it with me. Good response. A different response. Oh, well, you're being overreactive. It's not an issue. Gosh, you parents. Then you start to get worried. People who aren't interested in hurting children, people who want to protect children, people who are working with you are going to understand if you have to trust but verify. So we've shown you all these things that could be not normal. What is normal? We talked about, remember we said little girls sometimes, doesn't mean anything necessarily. Well, let's talk about what's normal for a minute. Sexual behaviors exist even for children, and they exist on a continuum. They can show up as part of normal development. They can show up when the child's under stress. They can show up because the kid is curious. They're confused. It can be a whole slew of reasons other than abuse. So I pulled up, and this is another real detailed slide. A lot of these are very detailed because I wanted them to make sense when you took it home and not just when we're talking about it. American Academy of Pediatrics has listed 4 types of sexual behavior that occurs in 2 to 6-year-olds. And they start with normal and common. Normal behaviors for children to have, very common, don't necessarily mean a thing. Then they go, and don't switch the slide yet, but they go to normal, less common. Then on later slides, we'll look at uncommon in normal children, meaning children who've been affected may show them regularly, but typically children don't. And then finally, the rarely normal stuff, the stuff we really get worried about. But if we look at this, normal behavior for a 2 to 6-year-old can include touching themselves, masturbating in public, viewing or touching a peer or new sibling's genitals, showing themselves to a peer, standing or sitting too close, trying to catch a glimpse of mom or dad naked. Kind of a key point here is that these behaviors are transient and the kid's distractible. They're not really that into it. You can say, Jenny, put your dress down, and she'll move on with her life. It happens. It's normal. Normal, but a little less common. We start getting a little more concerned. They rub up against other people. They may try to touch peers or adult genitals. They start doing mimicking of sexual movements. Crude, meaning they're not very good at it. They don't really know what they're showing you. Occasionally persistent. Oh, wow, that's a nice typo. Occasionally persistent and disruptive to others. Transient, moderately distractible. Sometimes they're a little hard to pull away from it. It's little Johnny, no, you really need to stop. Get off of my lap. We don't do that. But they can be redirected. They will move on. If we go to the next one, these behaviors, they're not really common in children who have not experienced some sort of sexual contact or abuse. They start asking others to do things. They insert objects into their genitals. They have explicit imitation. Where the last one was crude, they might mimic, but they really don't know what they're doing. This child knows what they're doing, and they shouldn't. There's no reason for them to know that. Sexual behaviors that are frequently disruptive, and they are persistent and resistant to distraction. They kind of need to do it. It takes more to get them away from the topic or idea. Now, the last column, these are things that should be big, waving red flags. They are rarely seen as just part of normal development, if at all. Sexual behaviors between children 4 or more years apart. A variety of these behaviors shown on a daily basis. This seems, well, there's nothing good about the topic, so they don't enjoy it. It's distressing to them, but they do it anyway. The earlier child who might mimic may appear amused, entertained. If the young child is masturbating, it feels good, it's supposed to. This child, it doesn't feel good. They don't like it, but they're doing it anyway, and that's very concerning. Sexual behavior that is aggressive or coercive, and when you try to distract this kid from it, they get mad. So these are going to fall in your big, waving red flag kind of column. The next piece, excuse me for a minute. You guys can't hear me when I'm drinking water, can you? I don't know how sensitive this thing is. The next slide gets to another key piece of what we're looking for. What does the molester look like? I wish I could put a picture up there for you. But most abusers, offenders, molesters, these terms are legal differentiations, I'm sure, but for the context of this, I'm kind of interchanging them. Look like everybody else. In most instances, they look like everybody else. And I searched the research to find out, okay, is there a typical age, typical race, typical economic standing, typical job range? And the best that I could come up with agreement on, usually men, not always, there are women offenders, but usually men, and they're slightly more likely to be young adults. Basically useless. Doesn't really tell us anything. I've lost my place. There are, though, types of offender. And as we look at these, it will help you know what patterns, the patterns will start making more sense. So there are two kind of big categories: the preferential child molester and the situational child molester. The preferential molester has a long-term and persistent pattern of behavior. This has been a lifelong calling. They have very specific sexual interest. They prefer a type. They have well-developed techniques because they practice all the time. And they are fantasy-driven. The situational child molester is different. This person doesn't necessarily prefer children. A child is a tool to an end. These people are regressed. They're morally indiscriminate. They don't have big right-wrong kind of values going on. They're sexually indiscriminate. It's not that I need you. I just need sex. So they're looking for opportunity. And typically feel inadequate because if they had a better sense of themselves, they would go to an adult, not a child. Okay? So the slides break down each of these a little bit, and I just kind of give you a snapshot on the types. The preferential child molester usually prefers children of a specific age and gender. I like little girls under the age of 6. When you're 8, you're too old. You don't appeal to me anymore. They collect pornography, usually about the age group or specific type that they're interested in. They operate through a process of seduction, and their motivation is identification with the child. They want to have a love affair. They've picked out somebody they're attracted to, and they want to have a relationship with this child. Introverted type. They prefer children who are strangers and really young. They collect pornography also. They operate by nonverbal sexual contact, and their motivation is fear of communication. I like really young kids, and I don't need to talk to them. I'm going to act, meet my needs, and move on. Or I'll pick one out that I can visit all the time. But it's not about relationship. Sadistic type is exactly what it sounds like. They will have a preference for specific age and gender. They will collect pornography. They don't need a relationship. They're going to force what they want. And they like the fact that they're in control and possibly that they're hurting somebody. Situational child molesters, regress type, they're picking someone who's there. I'm not very effective in my life. I can't have a relationship with you, but, you know, I can control a child. I can deal with that. And so I'm going to use this child to meet the need I would really like to meet over here. Morally indiscriminate, I just want something easy. I'm going to pick out who I can use the easiest. They use lure, they use force, they manipulate. And if you ask them why not? I want to. Right, wrong, who cares? I wanted to, so I did. The sexually indiscriminate type wants something new all the time. So they're going to select victims not based on one type, but based on something they haven't experienced before. They're going to find opportunities, existing things, as a point of contact, and they're motivated by boredom. I want to be entertained. And the inadequate type is going to pick somebody they feel they can obviously control. They're going to exploit their size and power as an adult. They're kind of socially isolated, kind of curious. I can't have a good sex life on my own with adults, and hey, it seems like a good way to go. So those are our types. All of that gives you an idea of how they work. When we get to grooming behaviors, it'll make sense. But the same way there is no one type of offender, there is no one type of person who gets abused. I can't give you a picture of that person either. Again, because it's such a wide range of people, there's not a lot we can agree on in terms of check the boxes. Here it is. Frequently female, slightly more likely to be from low-income families, but I almost hesitated to even put that on there because, again, it's so slight, it doesn't really mean much. And people who have experienced other forms of abuse, any form of abuse, are more likely to be sexually abused. If you have experienced sexual abuse, it goes even higher. Things that put you in higher risk as a child: you're socially isolated, absent or unavailable parents, and marital conflict or parental mental illness. Disclaimer time: if you are a parent who has problems in your life right now with marital conflict, with mental illness, or you work all the time and you feel guilty about not being home, it does not mean you cause the sexual abuse of your child. Kids who are in these situations tend to have more time alone, tend to feel more disconnected or lonely, tend to be more likely to respond favorably to an adult who comes in and says, "Oh, let me put my arm around you. I care what you got to say. Let's spend some time together." The intellectually disabled are at very high risk. If you look back at those types of offenders, they're people who would potentially have a credibility problem, would maybe have difficulty expressing or explaining what happened to them, maybe in some cases more likely to be manipulated. Kids with low self-esteem, kids with families that have significant substance abuse issues. When you're talking with a child, if the perpetrator is picking a victim because they're present, convenient, or because they're going to use force and it doesn't matter anyway, these things might make a difference if it means the child is alone more, unsupervised more. For the ones who want to entice a child into some sort of, quote, relationship, kids with low self-esteem, kids who are socially isolated, kids who would like to have more adult contact in their life are more susceptible to the tricks of the trade, so to speak. So the next slide is grooming, and that's what we're talking. You guys have heard of grooming, right? In relation to this? Has anybody? No? Some? Okay. Grooming is the process that an offender uses to prepare a child to be sexually abused. It makes the abuse possible, and it assures that the secret is kept. Because most people don't snatch a child off the street, because most offenders and victims know each other, and because it has to stay secret, there is a process for getting the child either to participate or in getting them more comfortable with what might happen so that the outcry isn't going to be, "Oh my God, you're touching me," that it's going to be, "Huh?" So this is the process. They select an approachable child. If it's somebody who has a type,
they're looking for type. If it's somebody who doesn't, they're looking for convenience. Whatever those things fell on their list of
what makes someone desirable, that's what they're going to go by, and someone who they have access to. The next step is going to be to try to form some sort of relationship. We talked earlier about money and gifts. If I'm an offender and I want to persuade you at some point that it's going to be okay for us to have sex, I may start by, hey, let's go, I'll buy you a Coke, got you a Coke, you know what, I got this. If you're a child from a family where your parents are in trouble, where money is tight, where times are hard, I take you to McDonald's might sound pretty good. And after all, I've known Bobby, Billy, Janet, whoever the person is, I've known them. They're nice. Feels good. They may start doing all those positive things we want our teachers, friends, pastors all to do for our kids. We want them to build them up. So they're going to say, gosh, you did great on that. Man, on the baseball field today, you were awesome. Gosh, that's a pretty, you look great. You've been working out, haven't you? All kinds of things to recognize their achievements, to make them feel like we're friends. Then they will start doing things, sometimes, to make it feel like there's a quid pro quo here. They give the gifts, they do nice things, I'll help you study for that test, I'll help you work on your swing, I'll give you a ride home, we'll do this stuff. And then it's like, I've done a lot of nice things for you. You're my friend, right? You care about me, right? And they start introducing increasingly intimate touch. Pat on the back, nobody's going to worry about. The kid doesn't worry about it. So you get a few pats on the back. Then you get, going to stand real close. We might sit real close. I'm pulling my chair up next to you. Accidentally brushing something. Oh, no, sorry, didn't mean to do that. But then I accidentally do it again, and I accidentally do it again, and a little more this time. And it gradually gets the child accustomed. It doesn't seem as strange as if I started by walking up and grabbing something, right? They increase the intimacy of it over time. They look for opportunities to get the child alone, and that's when the abuse can occur. And then they've got to coerce the child to keep the secret. You didn't mind when I took you out. You didn't mind when I bought you stuff. You didn't mind when I was doing all those nice things for you, and now you're saying these awful things about me? I thought you wanted it. Well, it really was your fault. Nobody's going to believe you. If they get caught, they'll send me to jail, and I thought you cared about me. Your mother knows anyway, so what's the point in telling? All kinds of things, and remember, we're talking about not equals here. We have a child and an adult, and the child will persuade or coerce. And the child won't tell. The offender will persuade or coerce, and the child won't tell. The child, for a long time, many times, will keep the secret. Some kids are going to say, he touched me, and it was wrong. Most kids will not. They will protect themselves if they can. They'll be afraid. They'll protect their parents. It will break my parents' heart if they knew. They will be ashamed of me if they knew. Daddy will go to jail, and Mommy will be all alone. I can't tell. I can't tear my family apart. They will protect their teachers. They'll protect their therapist, because if I'm going to tell you something ugly, awful, you might cry. You're a loving person. You care about them. You might cry. You might get angry. You might not know what to do with it. It may hurt you. You may feel guilty. The best thing is for me not to let you know. I can protect you too. I won't tell you either. They will even protect the abuser if they've built the right relationship with them. Well, I don't like it, but he's awfully good to us. All my friends love the scout leader, the coach, the fill in the blank. And if they got in trouble, my friends will hate me, and he'll feel bad, and they're going to protect everybody. These are some things that kids have said. I thought they knew. He would have hurt me. Everybody thinks he's great, and nobody would have believed me. It was my fault anyway. All of these things. This is why kids don't tell. One of the reasons, some of the reasons why kids don't tell. The next question is, once they tell, why do they recant? They must have been lying. Because we don't want to believe it happened. It's very attractive to think they lied. It was a mixed up kid, they were upset, they were angry. It didn't happen. The vast majority of reports are found to be accurate reports. The National Committee for the Prevention of Child Abuse, now this again is old and I apologize for the date on this, found that fewer than 2% of child reports and 6% of adult reports are judged to be false. But people recant all the time. More people recant than at some point, go back and forth, than stay with it. So 60%, even those with obvious physical evidence, you will have a child with injuries that could not have happened from anything else, and a sexually transmitted disease on top of it, and they will say, I made it up. I was wrong, it didn't happen, I was confused, I made it up. Why do they do it? If it's real, why do they do it? They're afraid. They're protecting other people. They see the painful reactions. They want to keep their family together, get their life back to normal. And this, number 3, once you start this process, it can be very overwhelming. Some research says that a child who discloses, and when they're able to move through the process of prosecution, can tell their story 11 times, publicly, other people. Remember that survey I said I could pass around, tell me about your sex life? The equivalent is, sir, please come on up, and I'm going to put the mic on you. Tell them about your sex life. That's not even traumatic sex, but it's traumatic talking about it. These kids don't want to do that. If I say I lied, maybe the abuse continues, maybe it stops, but all of this goes away. So the draw to recanting is huge. What is not on here, and should have been, as a specific, we have the painful reactions of others. If they disclose to a person who doesn't believe them, who blames them, who gets angry at them, well, I'm not doing that again. I don't need to tell someone else. And that's a big one. So it's part of what we're going to talk about in how do we respond to folks. The next slide is basically in just a couple minutes, Jackie gets to get up here, and she's going to talk to you about what do you do? What do you do from a DSS standpoint and legal standpoint if you suspect? But I want to give you just two slides, just a couple, on how do you respond to the child. When I started out, I said if we come away from this with anything that will help you reduce the misery of someone in this experience, then we've done something. So how do you respond? The first and most important thing is to believe them. Most reports, the vast majority of reports, are real. They're not making it up. Why would I make up something so humiliating to me? Why am I going to make up something that hurts everybody and turns my life upside down? Be the strong one. We talk about this with our therapists a lot. You're going to sit down with people in the course of therapy who are in miserable times in their life, and they will protect you as a therapist by not telling you something hard if they think you can't take it. These children need the adult to be stronger than they are, need them to be able to take it. And it means, even though you want to scream and yell and jump up and down, that you got to stay in control. You got to let them tell you what they need to tell you. Give them as much control as possible over how they tell their story. You're going to want to grab little Johnny and take him somewhere and say, tell them what he did to you. We're going to get the son of a whatever. Tell them. They may need to tell their story. They do need to tell their story. But what we want to do is give them as much control. They haven't had control over the abuse. We want to give them as much control as possible. Honey, I need to tell somebody so that we can keep you safe. Do you want to tell them yourself, or do you want me to say the words? Do I sit next to you? Does Dad come? Does Dad not come? Some things you can't control. DSS is going to tell you, and law enforcement will tell you how a lot of that works. But if the child can control something, we want to let them do it. Be honest about what you're going to do. Honey, I won't tell a soul. DSS. Abuse, almost as much as anything else, is about a trust violation. They've been betrayed at such a basic level that little trust violations after that will feel huge. If you can't keep it a secret, you got to tell them, I can't keep it a secret. We can't lie to them. We got to be honest. Now, be honest does not extend to, I'm going to go kill him. I've got my gun in the truck, and I'm going. One, we don't want you to end up in jail because you can't protect the child. Two, they start feeling responsible for that. So the anger part has to be separate. But the steps that you're taking for them, they need to know as much as possible. Protect them from further abuse. It's a no-brainer. We're going to do that instinctively. With little kids, it's easy. But with a teenager, you may have to make decisions for them that they should be able to but can't make on their own. You may need to take their cell phone. You may need to monitor their Facebook account. You may need to not ground them, we don't want to punish them, but to arrange for them to have someone with them more, because they won't always act in their best interest. They're in pain, they're confused, they're in the middle of all this. They could be all over the place. So you have to protect them. And you must be clear that the perpetrator is responsible, not the child. Doesn't matter what they did, doesn't matter what they said, should have known, shouldn't have snuck out, shouldn't have had the beer. Doesn't matter. They are not responsible for their own abuse. The next one. Good news. There is some. Children are resilient. Some kids will have no effect. Most kids will, but we can limit the impact, or rather, the impact can be lessened by the presence of protective factors. Individual characteristics of the child. When the abuse occurred, how old were they? Intellectually, how strong were they? Are they optimistic, high self-esteem kids? They tend to do better. Stability in the home is a protective factor. Stability in the community. They're not in a super high crime area. Basically, life feels pretty safe. Big protective factor. A supportive response by parents in the system. You do those things from the previous slide. You believe them. The offender is held accountable, if at all possible. All of those things create a better response for the kid. They have a relationship with a supportive adult, and they have access to health care, medical and mental health. All of those things help. So the last part is for you guys. I feel awful. What about me? This happened in your community. It's in your backyard. Now, like I said, it happens in every community, but it's impacting you guys in a serious, personal, and public way. You can expect, even though you did not personally experience abuse, to have periods of some of these things. It's the normal response to a trauma. General sadness, anger, maybe specific to a person, maybe general, anxiety, disbelief. I just can't say this happened here, I just can't do it. Guilt, Why didn't I see? What did I miss? What should I have done if I had only? Powerlessness, or I got to do something now. What are we going to do? We're going to have a meeting. We're going to start a club. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And hypervigilance. You may see, and I don't mean to be flip, Chester the molester behind every tree. Every time someone is nice to your child, for a little while, you're going to think, oh, I don't like that. Those are all normal reactions. You can talk about them with each other. Be aware that it's normal. It doesn't mean anything awful. It will spur us on to do good things and make good changes. At some point, you may decide to seek help for it. How do you know when to do that? If you want to, go right ahead. Set a meeting, sit down and talk to somebody one time. That could be the end of it. Or maybe you visit a couple times. So I just got to work through this. It's bothering me. If you are having feelings about this, worries about this, that you find are preoccupying, they're getting in your way, they're really starting to impact you, then you may want to give some serious thought to having somebody to kind of walk it through with. If you wake up in the middle of the night worrying about this, once, I woke up in the middle of last night worrying about this, so that's going to happen. If it starts disrupting normal patterns of sleep, if you lost your appetite, you're just feeling too down, go ahead and see somebody. And if you see significant increases in physical problems, that you suddenly are sick all the time, some of us turn anxiety into medical issues, or if substance abuse goes up, we always recommend getting some help with that. That's what I've got today. I know we'll have Jackie's part, we'll have questions. The one thing I need to do, because you guys are teachers, is to say that I made a mistake on my reference page. Y'all will know this. I have not properly cited my sources. I've given you references. I have not given you endnotes. I ask you to understand that I have in no way attempted to take the work of the people listed on these pages. And what we're going to do is, if I think we have the ability to do this, I will get my polished version, put my endnotes on there, and we're going to try to create a link on the agency webpage so that if you wanted this as a resource that you could actually use that was properly cited, or if you didn't get a copy and you want one, that you'd have access to it. Thank you very much.
Hello? Oh, there it is. All right, thank you, Rachel. That was great. Very informative. We'll do questions after this portion, which is actually, it looks like a lot of slides, but I'm not going to go over each and every one. Before I get started, I did want to thank the Haven. We have some community partners that set up some booths, and the CSB is back there. April is also Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and Ruth is back there if anybody wants additional information. She has the teal ribbons. We do blue ribbons for child abuse. They do teal ribbons for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Also, Northumberland Department of Social Services, we have some eligibility workers in the audience. And the services unit is also in the back. Everyone's there except Miss Neal, one of the social workers. We have Iris Fisher, one of the social workers, Tori Morris, a social worker. Georgia Sprague is our foster parent coordinator. She's back there trying to grab foster parents, so beware. And then we have Lawana Harbin, who is our self-sufficiency worker, and we have social worker Karen Adams as well. So the whole services unit, with the exception of Ms. Neal, is available back there with information, and please go by and visit the booth. And if you want some foster parent information, that's why Ms. Sprague is here. There were 2 brochures back there by Ms. Adams. I did not print the PowerPoint because most of the mandated reporting information as set forth by the Code of Virginia is in these 2 brochures. There's lots of them back there, and this is what I would like you to take and keep. It outlines your responsibilities as a teacher. The green one is actually just for the public, but it's newer. These statistics are newer. The blue one is actually a guide for school employees. So this is specific to school employees. The mandated reporting. The first slide talks about who is a mandated reporter. I think the social workers are probably going to try to get these to you guys because they have them. That's a lot of the information is in those brochures. The mandated reporting, it lists everybody who is a mandated reporter who has to report if they believe abuse or neglect has occurred. You report that to the place where the abuse occurred or where the child lives. If you don't know for sure, report it to us anyway. We'll make sure it gets to the right place. The second slide highlighted is really the only part I need to touch with you guys. You are a mandated reporter. Any teacher or other person employed in a public or private school, kindergarten, or nursery school. One study that I did want to mention, in 2000, a study by Bendel, it was a Massachusetts and Connecticut study, but it did show that when they talked to school personnel, that it appeared that only 31% of a suspected abuse and neglect was reported. So that's a pretty low number. The next slide just goes and lists the rest of the mandated reporters. That's also going to be in your brochure. Now, you just have to remember, it's not the reporter's task. You don't have to substantiate the abuse. You just have to report if you suspect it. It's our job to look at it and validate it. So if you suspect it, you're obligated to report it. Okay, the reporting process. The first paragraph talks about hospitals, schools, facilities. There's often a designee, and I know that Northumberland school policy at this point does have a designee. It's my understanding that such a person may report to the designee, and I believe that's one of the changes that are being looked at, where you are actually going to be encouraged to report directly. That does 2 things. It gives us accurate information. If you hear it directly, we can get the best information from you. If a child tells you something and then it goes to someone else and then they call us, we can't ask questions. We can't say, well, what about this? What about that? We'd have to call back and say, can you go ask this? Can you go ask that? So we get the firsthand information if you call yourself. Also, it gives you your right. In Virginia, reporters can remain anonymous, and we don't release that information even to the families of who reports. Now, I have to say, sometimes they're going to know if it came from the school. If we go to them and we say, or we go to the school and we talk to their child and there's bruising and we've taken pictures and we say, your child has a bruise that looks like a belt mark or whatever, they're going to know that somebody from the school called us. They're not going to think that we're there just scoping kids in general. So we're not going to say specifically where it came from because only a court can do that. Only the court can order us to release that information. But sometimes they're going to kind of figure it out. So when you call directly, it does protect you in a way. You may not want to have to go to a colleague or a fellow employee and let them know that you're going to report. So you do have the option to report directly. Okay. There are penalties for failure to report. You're supposed to report within 72 hours. It is a misdemeanor if you do not report. 72 hours in our world is a long time if you wait that long. If you suspect something, especially because of a suspicious bruise, suspicious marks, 72 hours, we could lose the evidence if it is something to it. So they say 72 hours, but if we're looking for a fast response and protection of a child, if you see something like that, sooner is always better. Okay, what should be reported? In order to meet your responsibility as a mandated reporter, you must first understand what it is that you are required to report, which is not simple. All reports of abuse or neglect is held in strict confidence. That's where I said we're not going to say where it came from. There are 5 different types in Virginia of child abuse and child neglect. Physical abuse, physical neglect, sexual abuse, emotional maltreatment, and substance abuse newborns, which most people in the school aren't going to see the substance exposed newborns. You're going to see the physical abuse usually, or the physical neglect is actually, I think, a higher percentage of what's being seen. When properly trained, the reporters should be alert to the indicators of possible abuse, such as the suspicious bruising or the behaviors. And that's what we ask that you report to us. The next chart, this is the Virginia reports from 2010. As you can see, physical neglect is the majority. We get a lot of calls on the physical neglect because of the clothes. The clothes aren't fitting. They're not appropriate to the weather. The child is always hungry. The child is not clean. Those are all the neglect. Of course, the physical abuse would probably be the most of the marks, the bruising that's reported. But if you see, sexual abuse is a big chunk of what was reported. And this is not just school calls. This is everywhere. This is all cases. Now, what's outside of our scope that sometimes we get calls on? Educational neglect, truancy, a child's not getting to school. That is a school issue that's handled through CHINS, a child in need of services. Often we will partner with the school because if they're not getting to school, there's usually some other issues going on, and we can partner together to provide services to the family. Immunizations, preventative care, that's not a CPS issue. Families can choose not to do the immunizations or the preventative care. Seatbelt violations, you see kids jumping around in cars and they're not in the car seats. That's a law enforcement issue. When it becomes a CPS issue is when the deputies stop the driver and someone's intoxicated and they have the kids in the car. That's when it becomes a CPS issue. And poverty, that's another one. Poverty is not really a CPS if it's strictly poverty. What we can do is we can go in and help refer the families to possible SNAP program, food stamps, assistance in the community. But just because a family's in poverty and can't afford certain things doesn't mean that we're going to see that as child abuse or neglect. It really depends on the whole picture of the family. The goals of response. After you make the call and we determine that it's valid or not, and we have state code that kind of lists what criteria has to be met before we can respond to someone's home, we'll go out and we'll assess the child's safety. What we'll do when we're assessing the child's safety is we're going to see who is the alleged perpetrator. Is there another parent in the home that could protect the child? Does dad need to leave and mom will be okay to protect the child? What does the home look like? Is it, clean? Is it safe? Are there hazards? We'll go to the teachers. We'll often go to the schools. We're asking, how does the child come to school? How is the child dressed? Are they clean? Do they appear hungry? We're looking at the whole home environment and what kind of support systems that the family has. We want to strengthen and support families and prevent the reoccurrence of child maltreatment. We want families to stay together. So what we want to do is we want to put the services in place. We want to get the family in counseling. We want to do intensive in-home counseling if needed. We want to put the family in substance abuse if that's a parent issue. We want the children to stay in the family if it's safe to do so. The Code of Virginia requires immediate response. We have 45 to 60 days to complete our assessment or investigation. The calls that come in, there's 2 tracks. We can do them as an assessment where we just go in and say, oh, we just want to assess, we want to talk, we want to see what services we can do. Or we can choose to take it as an investigation, which we'll have to do a finding of whether we believe abuse or neglect has occurred. The assessment is the less invasive. That's more supportive services, not so much serious. Investigations, all out-of-family complaints, which would be school complaints, are automatically taken as investigations, as are serious child abuse complaints like bruising, all sex abuse cases. Depending on the severity, we kind of have the option to go in a little less forceful and more as a resource to the family. We will interview the child, the siblings, the parents. As I said, often we're going to interview the children before the parents know we're going to interview the children. That's when you see the staff at the school. We do have the authority to go to the school and speak to children, the alleged victim, and their siblings without parental permission. We'll notify the family afterwards. We want, usually, especially if it's a case that you've called us on physical abuse, we want to get the child's story before we get the parent's story. We want to know exactly what the child is saying first. Our ultimate goal is to reunite the family as soon as it is safe to do so. If the child must be removed, we do give the parents the option of finding appropriate placement first. We want foster care to be the absolute last resort for our children. If there's a grandparent, if there's an aunt, if there's an uncle, if there's a church Sunday school teacher, someone that the parent can identify to take their child while we put services in place to help the family, we would prefer, and we give the parents the option to do that before we have to look at the foster care placement. Okay, for follow-up, you do have the right to know as a reporter what happened in the case. It's very vague information. It's a letter that pretty much states appropriate action has been taken. Many of you, if you've been reporting to the designee, you won't get a letter. The designee is going to get the letter because that's who's reporting it to us. If you report directly to our department, you'll get the letter yourself. If it's in the child's best interest, which lots of times it is, involving the school personnel, because you're the front line with the kids, you have the key position to see what's going on with the children. We will give you a little more information than that. We'll tell you what's going on because we want you to look out for the child to see if maybe the services that we put in place are assisting the family. If we come to you and you've seen a problem and we have services in the home, at least a month later after these services, we're hoping that if we come back to you, you're going to tell us that you've seen an improvement. If you're not contacted within the 45 to 60 days with our letter, which, like I said, is a pretty vague letter, you can contact us, and we'll let you know what we can. What we're allowed to tell you has to be in the child's best interest. Okay, the integrity of the investigation. This is actually the last slide. I just want to make sure everybody gets these for your reference. In order to preserve the integrity of the investigation, we do need your help. It is best practice to leave the questioning of the alleged victims to the social worker and/or law enforcement. We have the investigative protocol in place that helps us to obtain the most accurate information. So you can understand if we're questioning a child with law enforcement, we certainly want to do that in an environment where we can preserve that information in case we do have to go to court, in case we have to get a protective order, because then law enforcement is documenting it in case they need to do legal action, and we're documenting the information for our case. So, you know, when the child talks to you and tells you what's going on and you report it, it's best to, if possible, to leave it at that and let us take it over from there. We do respond as quickly as possible. And there's the theme for April: protecting children is everyone's job. And that is all we have, but we will take questions if you had any for Rachel or myself on the mandated report.